I still remember the way my daughter looked at me that day, a look that mixed fear, anxiety, and something I couldn't quite decipher. She was never one to make dramatic requests, much less insist on something with such urgency. But at that moment, when I casually mentioned that I was going to organize her room, her face paled in a way that left me paralyzed. She placed her hand on mine, almost trembling, and murmured in a voice as low as a whisper that could barely be heard, "Mom, please, don't open my closet. Don't tidy anything up in there. I'll take care of it later." The sentence came out broken, almost as if she struggled to pronounce each word, and it was precisely this exaggerated reaction that sparked the first glimmer of suspicion in me. I was always the mother who helped, who organized, who put everything in order when my daughter's life got hectic. She never minded, never complained. How many times did I go into her room to fold clothes, pick up the children's toys, straighten the bed she left messy because of the morning rush? It was always natural, always part of our family dynamic. But that day, in that simple comment, an invisible wall appeared between us, a barrier hastily built, as if she needed to hide something she shouldn't or that couldn't be seen. I tried to hide my discomfort. I asked if everything was all right. She answered too quickly, as if she had memorized the phrase, "I'm just tired, Mom, that's all. Don't touch anything." But even trying to sound calm, her breathing betrayed something bigger. She was nervous, very nervous. The kind of nervousness that doesn't stem from mess or embarrassment. It stems from secrets, and secrets have a smell, a texture, a weight, even when they aren't revealed. From that moment on, I felt that that closet carried something that didn't belong in her routine, something that didn't match the life she said she led. I spent the rest of the afternoon watching her without her noticing. Every time I walked toward the hallway leading to her room, she would suddenly appear with an improvised excuse. "Mom, want some coffee? Mom, let's go outside and see the kids. Mom, can I show you something on my phone?" It was as if her mind was exclusively dedicated to preventing me from approaching the closet door. Nothing about her behavior resembled the strong, practical, direct, and organized woman I had always known. She seemed like a different person, someone haunted by something. At that point, I started trying to justify what I was seeing. Maybe it was stress. After all, she had been complaining about sleepless nights. Maybe it was the excess of responsibilities, since the children were more restless than usual. Maybe it was even some problem at work that she didn't want to share so as not to worry me. I forced explanations myself to try to calm my own heart. A mother always tries to believe the best before accepting the worst. And I did exactly that. I sought comforting explanations, even when my instinct whispered the opposite. But the discomfort didn't go away. As the day went on, I noticed that every time I mentioned the room or anything related to the house, her eyes would look away from mine. She would avert her gaze like someone carrying guilt, a guilt that weighs heavily, a guilt that tightens the chest. And I've known my daughter since she was born. I know how to differentiate tiredness from fear, anxiety from despair, irritation from panic. And what I saw that day was panic, a silent, disguised panic, but impossible to ignore. That night, as I put the grandchildren to bed, I heard hurried footsteps coming from the hallway. It was her, heading straight for her room, locking the door behind her, something she never did. Through the gap under the door, I saw shadows moving frantically, as if she were hastily rearranging something. The closet door slammed open, then slammed shut again. There was haste, there was fear, there was secrecy, and as I watched from afar, I felt my heart clench. What could be inside that justified such urgency? Why hide something from me? Why this sudden desperation? I went back into the living room and sat down, trying to reason. A mother senses when something is out of the ordinary. And in that house that night, nothing was normal. The energy was heavy, the tension invisible, and I knew, without seeing, without touching, without asking, that that closet hid something that threatened not only the peace of the house, but perhaps the safety of the children. It was as if the silence itself was screaming at me. I didn't want to distrust my own daughter. She had always been responsible, dedicated, and loving towards her children. But there was something about her that day that I had never seen before. A fear that doesn't disguise itself. A fear that doesn't spring from nowhere. A fear that always points to something hidden. And even trying to fight my instincts, I couldn't shake the feeling. Every minute. It was as if a voice inside me kept repeating that this story wasn't right. That something serious was happening. That there was a truth hiding behind that wooden door. And it was then, in a moment of absolute silence, while the house slept, and I stared at the ceiling trying to understand the inexplicable, that I realized the gravity of what I was about to discover. It was at that moment that I realized something was wrong, very wrong. The next day, everything seemed to be going as normal. My daughter woke up early, got ready for work in a hurry, gave the children a quick kiss and then me, but without looking at me for very long. I noticed, when someone is happy, they look you in the eye. When they're running away from something, they look away. And she looked away the whole time. Before leaving, she even repeated, as if she were reading a memorized text, "You don't need to tidy my room today, Mom. I'll take care of it later, okay?" I just smiled and nodded, but inside, that request sounded like a cry of alarm. As soon as the door closed and the sound of her car faded into the street, the house sank into a different kind of silence. It was as if the walls held a secret I didn't yet know, but one that was already suffocating me. I stood there for a few minutes, staring down the hallway. The children were playing in the living room, oblivious to everything, too innocent to realize that their world was about to be turned upside down. And I, as a grandmother, as a mother, knew I could no longer ignore the feeling that had been growing inside me. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't intrusion. It was a protective instinct. I took a deep breath, tidied the kitchen, put the clothes in the washing machine, picked up some toys scattered on the floor, all on purpose, trying to gather the courage to do what I already knew I was going to do. Each step I took through the house seemed like a rehearsal for the moment I would finally open that door. And with each movement, the same question echoed in my mind. What is she hiding from me? When I finished the basics, I looked at the clock. There were still hours before my daughter would be back. The children were engrossed in a cartoon, sitting on the sofa, with the cookie jar between them. I went to the living room, ran my hand through each of their hair, and said, "Grandma's just going to Mommy's room for a second, okay? If you need anything, call me." They nodded without giving it much thought. I smiled, but my hands were already cold. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was echoing inside my chest. I walked down the hallway as if entering unfamiliar territory. My daughter's room had always been a familiar place, but that day, it felt like the setting for something I didn't yet understand. The door was only slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly, and the room revealed itself as usual. The bed was a little unmade, some clothes were on the chair, perfume lingered on the dresser, a photo of the children smiling on the headboard. Everything seemed normal. But I knew the problem wasn't there, in plain sight. The problem was behind that other door, the closet door. For a few seconds, I stood there before it. It was just a simple wooden door, like any other. But at that moment, it seemed like so much more than that. It was almost symbolic. On one side, the image of the daughter I knew. On the other, the truth she was trying to hide. And suddenly, I realized that by opening that door, I wouldn't just be entering a physical space, I would be crossing a boundary in our relationship. But it was no longer about me and her. It was about the children. With a slightly trembling hand, I turned the doorknob. It yielded easily. The closet wasn't locked. That alone surprised me. If it was something so forbidden, why not lock it? Perhaps she counted on my trust. Perhaps she thought I would respect her request without question. Perhaps she didn't imagine that her fear had awakened something greater in me. When I opened the door, a strong, mixed smell of mold, chemicals, and something else I couldn't identify filled the room. It wasn't the usual smell of stored clothes. It was heavy, dense, unpleasant. I turned on the light. From the outside, it looked like just a small closet, with shelves, hangers, and a few stacked boxes. But as soon as I stepped inside, I realized something was deeply wrong. I started with the most obvious thing. The clothes hanging there were disorganized, which wasn't her style. There were wrinkled dresses, coats thrown haphazardly, shoes mixed up, as if someone had hastily rummaged through everything and then hadn't had the time, or patience, to put it all back in its place. On top of one of the shelves, I noticed two large, file-type boxes stacked on top of each other. One of them had a poorly fitted lid. I carefully pulled the first box down. It was heavy. Upon opening it, I found a strange mix: crumpled documents, overdue bills, collection, notices, bank statements, letters that had never been opened. Some bore red stamps, threats of service cutoff, legal notices. My heart sank. My daughter was hiding financial problems, and they weren't small ones. Among the papers were handwritten letters, some torn, others folded so many times they seemed to have been read and reread in secret. I read loose excerpts, pleas for help, demands from someone she clearly feared, phrases like, "If you don't pay, you'll regret it. Think of the children. This won't end well." Each phrase was like a stab in the back. She was being pressured, blackmailed, and she didn't tell me anything. But the worst was yet to come. In the second box, I found something that made my stomach churn. There were small pieces of children's clothing, some stained, dirty, as if they had been used and hastily stored away without being washed. There were children's t-shirts with stains I didn't recognize, soiled socks, crumpled pajamas. Among them, soiled diapers, already dry, wrapped in plastic bags. The smell I hadn't been able to identify came from there. My whole body reacted with indignation. This wasn't minor carelessness. This was negligence. In the corner of the shelf, there was a pharmacy bag overflowing with medications. I picked it up and started looking at each box. There were controlled substances, strong tranquilizers, antidepressants, sleeping pills, pills that should be prescribed. Some were empty, others half full, others still sealed, but all mixed together without any organization. Some crumpled prescriptions indicated doses that had clearly been exceeded. My mind started working quickly. Is she taking all of this on by herself? Is someone giving this to her? Or was someone giving this to the children? That last possibility made my blood run cold. I remembered the last few weeks. The children were sleepier than usual. Some nights they slept soundly, difficult to wake, dark circles under their eyes that I attributed to tiredness, too much screen time, routine. What if it wasn't that? What if there was something more to it? I continued searching. Behind one of the boxes, I found a bottle without a label, only a handwritten tag with a dosage. It wasn't a regular pharmacy medicine. Next to it, a disposable syringe still in its plastic wrapping. My whole body went on high alert. At the bottom of the closet, almost hidden, was a child's backpack. I recognized it immediately. It was one of my grandson's school backpacks. I opened it. Inside, instead of notebooks, there were more medications, a container with loose pills, and a crumpled note that read, "You know this is dangerous. Stop before someone notices." At that moment, my vision blurred for a few seconds. I didn't know if I felt more fear, anger, sadness, or disappointment. Everything was mixed together. The closet, which had previously been just a space for clothes and boxes, now revealed itself as a repository of secrets, hidden problems, and silent risks. And at the center of it all were my grandchildren. Suddenly, everything started to fall into place. The excessive tiredness, the strange reactions, the requests not to touch anything, the fear in her eyes. My daughter wasn't just disorganized or tired. She was immersed in something dangerous, something that somehow was already affecting the children. Indignation overwhelmed me. As a mother, I felt betrayed. As a grandmother, I felt panicked. The idea that my grandchildren could be in danger inside their own house, inside their own room, inside their own closet, was unbearable. I closed my eyes for a few seconds, took a deep breath, but the conclusion came like a scream inside me. This was no longer a problem to talk about later. It wasn't something to look at calmly. It wasn't a matter to wait for the right moment. It was urgent. It was serious. It was about life, safety, and protection. When I opened my eyes again, there was no longer room for doubt, fear, or hesitation. I knew exactly what I had to do. Right then, in that moment, I knew I had no other choice. I needed to act. After I closed the closet door, my hands were so cold they seemed to disobey me. My heart was racing, my breath was short, and an overwhelming sense of urgency took hold of me. There was no more room for doubt, no more room to negotiate with my conscience, nor to seek comfortable justifications. The dirty clothes, the documents, the threats, the medication, it all screamed one thing: my grandchildren were in danger. And when it comes to protecting a child, there is no time to hesitate. I left the room trying to stay calm, even though inside I was crumbling. I looked into the living room. The children were still there, playing with colorful blocks on the rug, completely oblivious to the weight hanging over the house. Their innocence was almost cruel. How could they imagine that their own mother, the person who should protect them, was trapped in such a deep abyss? How? Could they know that that closet held a risk capable of changing their lives forever? I approached them with a forced smile, trying not to show the anguish consuming my chest. I knelt down, ran my hand through each of their hair, and said in a soft voice, too soft for someone about to make the hardest decision of their life, "Honey, let's go for a little walk with Grandma, okay? Just a quick stroll." They laughed, excited by the idea. Children don't feel the gravity of the world the way we do. Maybe it's better that way. Maybe it's God's way of protecting innocence. I went to their room and started grabbing some clothes. Not many, just the essentials. But each piece I folded felt like it weighed a ton. It was as if every t-shirt, every pair of socks, Every toy I put in the bag carried the bitter confirmation that my daughter was fighting a battle I didn't understand and that she was losing. As I hurriedly packed my bags, my heart broke in two. On one hand, the fierce protective instinct that drove me without me needing to think. On the other, the crushing pain of realizing I was about to act without the consent of my own daughter, a woman I raised, educated, loved, and trusted. I didn't want to take her away from the children's lives. I didn't want to push her away. I wanted to help her. But at that moment, helping meant putting distance. It meant saying no. It meant making decisions she couldn't or didn't want to make. Part of me screamed that I was doing the right thing. Another part cried, begging me to stop, sit down, breathe, talk to her before taking such an extreme step. But then the image of the closet would return to my mind like a punch. The strong medications, the threats in the letters, the dirty children's clothes, the unlabeled bottle, the syringe, and always, at the center of it all, the same question echoed. What if something happens to them while I hesitate? And then, the decision became clear, crystal clear. I grabbed the suitcases, put on, the children's coats, took out documents from the living room drawer, and started leading them to the door. They followed me, calm, confident, safe, because they were with their grandmother. And that gave me strength. Before leaving, I went back to the room one last time. I glanced around the space my daughter called home, and there, for a few seconds, I allowed myself to feel the pain I had been saving for later. The pain of admitting that, as much as I wanted to save her, at that moment I needed to save her children first. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "Daughter, forgive me, but I can't close my eyes." I left the house without leaving notes, without warnings, without explanations. There was no time. I locked the door and walked quickly to the car. As I put the children in their car seat, my hands were still trembling. I tried to hide it so they wouldn't notice, but inside I was a wreck. A sense of urgency pulsed within me. I had the feeling that at any moment, my daughter could appear at the door, confront me, stop me, but I continued. As soon as I got in the car, the first thing I did was call the local Child Protection Authority. The operator listened to every detail in silence, and when I answered her questions, I realized something that broke my heart. Everything I had found was enough for an immediate investigation. She advised me to take the children to a doctor for evaluation. It was protocol. It was protection. It was necessary. I called their pediatrician, explained only the essentials, and he asked me to come there as soon as possible. On the way, my mind was racing like a hurricane. I was trying to understand how my daughter had reached that point. What pressured her so much? Who was blackmailing her? Why didn't she tell me anything? What did I fail to see? Where did I go wrong as a mother? The guilt was overwhelming. It weighed on me like a weight on my chest, preventing me from breathing properly. I was doing the right thing, I knew it, but I was devastated. Because protecting my grandchildren meant, at the same time, admitting that my daughter was lost in an emotional and psychological chaos that I might not be able to resolve. We arrived at the doctor's office. While the doctor examined the children, I observed his every movement, every expression, every sigh. He ordered simple tests, spoke to me carefully, and then said something that almost made my legs give way. "You did well to bring them. We'll be monitoring them closely." That phrase, "they did well," gave me courage. For the first time that day, I felt that I wasn't exaggerating, that I wasn't reacting impulsively. I was saving my grandchildren. I was doing what needed to be done. We left the doctor's office later, already with formal instructions to register the case. I took a deep breath. I looked at the children in the back seat. They were playing with a toy the doctor had given them, completely oblivious to the emotional tsunami forming around them. That's when the phone rang. My heart stopped. My body went cold. I recognized the number on the screen. She was my daughter. She was calling, desperate. And with that phone ring, a new storm was about to begin. The ringing phone seemed to echo in my mind as if announcing the beginning of something inevitable. I knew that moment would come. I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. But even so, when I answered and heard my daughter's voice, trembling, breathless, almost unrecognizable, my legs went weak. "Mom, where are you? Where are the children?" There was despair in her voice, a despair that wasn't just maternal concern. It was the despair of someone who knows something has been exposed, of someone who has realized that the veil hiding the truth has finally fallen. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "We're fine. I needed to get the children out of the house." On the other end of the line, I heard a sob. "Mom, please, come back. Let me explain." That phrase, "let me explain." It made my heart clench in a way I can't describe. I wanted to understand. I wanted to believe there was some explanation, some justification, some reason that would ease the pain I was feeling, but I also knew that, whatever the truth was, it would be devastating. Hours later, she arrived at the place where I had arranged for us to talk. I didn't want to meet her at home, nor in a place where the children could hear. It needed to be something neutral, safe, private, a place where I could look her in the eyes without distractions. No excuses, no running away. When she got out of the car, she looked smaller than I remembered. Her shoulders were hunched, her eyes tired, her face swollen from crying, her hands trembling. This wasn't the strong woman I helped raise. This was a broken person, a person carrying something too heavy to face alone. She ran towards me, but I raised my hand, asking her to calm down. Before anything else, I want you to sit down, and I want you to listen to me. She obeyed without arguing, which already told me a lot. She'd always been stubborn, always defending her point to the end. But there, on that bench, she seemed like a child again, waiting for me to tell her what to do. I went into the closet. I said it slowly, letting each word find its way to her like a stone thrown into a lake. The reaction was immediate. She closed her eyes tightly, as if she had been struck in the chest. Then she began to cry, but not a silent cry. It was a desperate, almost choked cry, as if she were trying to expel years of accumulated pain. "Mom, I didn't want you to see that." "And why?" I asked, my voice firm. "Why did you hide all of that from me? Why did you put the children at risk? Why did you let the situation get to this point?" "I want the truth, all of it." She took a deep breath, wiped her face with trembling hands, and finally began to speak. What I heard shattered every part of me. She spoke about the abusive relationship she had hidden from everyone, about the man who entered her life promising support, love, security, and who, little by little, took it all away. She said he isolated her from her family, controlled her finances, took her money, threatened her children, and put her in a devastating emotional cycle. He talked about the blackmail, regarding the debts, regarding the notes I found, notes written by him. He recounted that he was responsible for the children some nights while she worked double shifts to pay for what he demanded. And it was on those nights that the dirty laundry piled up, the children became more sleepy, and their routine changed. He said it was normal, that she was exaggerating, that children are just like that. But that wasn't the worst part. She confessed that she started using strong medication because of severe depression. She said that, to cope with the weight of fear, abuse, and blackmail, she clung to medication she found without medical supervision. She said she tried to stop, tried to control herself, tried to hide it because she was ashamed of failing as a mother, ashamed of failing as a woman, ashamed of showing that she was being destroyed by someone she herself allowed into her life. And then, with a broken voice, she admitted something that tore me apart inside. "Mom, I knew I was losing control, but I didn't know how to ask for help. I was afraid they would take my children away from me. I was afraid of disappointing you." I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to absorb the weight of it all. It was true, the truth I had asked for, but never wanted to hear. "Daughter," my voice faltered. "Why didn't you tell me before?" She put her hands to her face and cried even harder. "Because I didn't want you to know that I was destroying myself." There was a long silence between us, a heavy silence, full of guilt, pain, and wounded love. I understood her despair. I understood her fear. But that didn't lessen the gravity of what had happened. It didn't erase the risk my grandchildren had faced. I took a deep breath and tried to stay calm as I said, "Protecting doesn't mean abandoning. Loving doesn't mean accepting everything. And sometimes, saving someone means saying enough is enough. You need help, and I will help you. But first, I need to make sure they are safe." She looked at me as if I had ripped the ground out from under her feet. "Mom, please. I'm not a bad mother, I just lost control." I held their hands. "I know, but losing control can be costly. I love you, but I love your children too, and for now, they need to stay with me." The pain in her eyes was almost unbearable. It wasn't anger. It wasn't wounded pride. It was fear. Fear of losing everything. Fear of facing her own reality. Fear of admitting she needed urgent help. She finally nodded, still crying. "I'll get treatment. I promise. Just don't abandon me." I hugged her, feeling her body tremble as if it were about to collapse. And in that hug, I felt two truths coexisting. I was saving my grandchildren, and at the same time, I was losing my daughter to an abyss she herself didn't know how to escape. As we walked away, I looked her straight in the eyes and finished. "I lost my daughter in that closet, but I saved my grandchildren. If this story touched you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. This helps me continue bringing powerful, emotional, and truthful stories. And tell me in the comments, what would you do in my place?